Okay, in this tutorial I'm going to help you answer this practicing exam questions step 1. And in this question we are going to look at how we describe and explain the weather that we're going to find in these three cities. Okay, now you will actually find if you look down in the question that Manchester has actually been done for you. And it's really quite important to study this little example that I've put in because it shows you the key things that you want to put into your answer. You want to, for the other two cities, in this case London and Glasgow, you want to be able to tell me what is the temperature in London and Glasgow. What is the rainfall? Is there any rain? Or if there isn't any rain, tell me that there is no rain. Okay. What's the wind speed like? Where's the wind coming from? And what's the cloud cover like? Each time you tell me one of these 5 aspects of the weather, what you want to be able to do is then tell me how you know that that is the case. So you need to explain. Because if you have a look at the question, it asks you to explain as well as describe. So let's just have a little look at Manchester that's been done for you. In Manchester, I've said it's warm. Okay? And I've said the reason for that is it's in the warm sector. Now, if you remember from what you've just read on the previous pages and the last lesson, this section here is what we call the warm sector. It's actually an area of warm air coming from the south. It's a warm air mass. Okay? And if you remember, what I also then said is all of the area around that forms an area we call the cold sector because it's in a cold air mass. Okay? So, we know it's going to likely to be warmer in Manchester than it is elsewhere because it's in this warm air. Okay, we don't know if it's going to be warm because we don't really yet know what the time of year is. And remember, you need to know what the time of year is if you're going to say it's warm. If this was December, I wouldn't be saying it's warm, as in 20 degrees. I would just, it's warmer than it is in one of these areas, which are in the colder air. Right, let's just have a little look at what else we've also said. We have, the question also indicates, if I just rub this out, that there will be scattered clouds due to the warm front having recently passed. Okay, so how do I know that? Well, there's Manchester, and if we remember that these fronts are always moving from west to east in the UK, so they're always moving in this direction, that this front here, this warm front, must have been recently sitting over Manchester. Now, as they pass over places like Manchester and move on, so in this case we can see the front's moved on, they leave behind clouds. So even though the front moves away, you still get a lot of clouds and you often get a little bit of rain too. So I would still expect there to be clouds, lots of clouds, scattered clouds around, and I would have been saying that that is because of the warm front passing. Okay, what else have we got? Well, there might be some rain. Why have I said that? Because the warm front recently passed. Okay? That's again the same explanation as I just made for the previous point. Okay, continuing on. Let's just rub that out. I'm saying that the wind is an average speed. And why am I saying that? Because the isobars are quite close. But they're not really close, as we can see up here. But they're not really far apart, as they are down in London down here. Okay? So that's me said about the wind speed. So what's left? Well, if you go and check your little list, you've got to make sure you have ticked off all of the things on that list. So I have done the temperature. I have done the rainfall. I have talked about the wind speed. I talked about the clouds. The only thing I've not talked about is this one here. And so if we have a look, the wind direction is coming from the southwest. Let me just prove that's the case. Is it coming from the southwest in Manchester? Well, let's try to just remember, what do we need to know? We need to know that winds travel in an anti-clockwise direction, that's that way, in low pressure air. And we know this is low pressure because we can have a look up here, we can see the center of the low. And we know that the winds follow the direction of the isobars, which are those air pressure lines that we can see on the map. So let's just review that. We know that they're following these lines, and if we go in Manchester, Well, they're coming from here, so we can see they must be heading in that direction. So they're coming from the southwest in Manchester and heading off in this direction. Okay, of course that's me just saying the wind. I've now got to say why, and I just give my explanation, which you can see down here, which is they're travelling anti-clockwise in a low pressure weather system. Right, so Manchester's done for you. What you've got to do is do Glasgow and London. You've got to make sure that each one of your 5 points over here is reviewed and that you link it to some piece of evidence. So if we just have a very quick look, I'm not going to give you the answer because there are 10 marks for this question, as you might have spotted, and therefore... Okay, so there's 10 marks, and let's have a look at London. What do we know? Well, I'm just going to give you some hints. We can see that the isobars are quite far apart. Okay, we can see that London sits under this front right here, which we know is a warm front. Okay, now because we know it's a warm front, that should allow us to say something about the type of rain, and I suggest you look back in your virtual notes to find out what type of rain. We should also be able to say something about the types of cloud cover we're going to see. So look back in your notes to do with clouds. And because we've got a warm front is now sitting there, we should know something about the temperature. Because London has now just moved into this warm sector. Okay? Wind speed and wind direction, well, that's going to come from our knowledge of the isobars. Likewise, Glasgow, what have we got with Glasgow? Well, we can see this cold front is now sitting over Glasgow. That puts Glasgow on the other side of the warm sector, so it's now in this area. Okay? So if we look back a few the previous pages in our virtual notes, we should be able to find out what cold fronts will tell us about the temperature, cold fronts will tell us about the rainfall, and cold fronts will tell us about cloud cover. Okay, when we come to explaining it. And finally, well, we can have a look at the isobars on all of these. Let me just clear all these drawings, because if we have a little look at this in Glasgow, we can see the isobars are really close together, so we should by now know what that's happening. We also know that the winds are going in an anti-clockwise direction. Following the isobars like that. Okay, so tell me about the weather. Tell me 5 features of the weather in London, 5 features of weather in Glasgow, and I had them listed over here just a second ago. And then explain why you know that for each of the 5, just like you've seen in the Manchester answer. So you follow this tutorial, you should be able to answer this question. And each descriptive point you make about the weather in London will get you a mark. Each descriptive point you make about the weather in Glasgow will get you a mark. And then explanations that you offer for why that will also get you a mark. And I want to see description and explanation to successfully answer this question.